This episode is brought to you by Paraswap, the leading aggregator to find best prices across various DEXs. You'll hear more about them later in the show.
To me, the most interesting things in this industry are going to be the games. If you're looking at Web3 gaming with NFTs, those are going to be the big winners.
All right, everybody. Got a special little guest here today. We've got Justin Kahn. You guys might know him from Justin of Justin TV, but also as the co-founder of Twitch, which he sold for a couple $1,000,000. I think the actual number is like 970 to Amazon, which we're going to talk a little bit about. But really, we brought him on not to talk about Twitch, but to talk about something that I think is 10 times more exciting than Twitch, which is Fractal. It's a marketplace that he just launched selling in-game assets as NFTs. Justin, my friend, welcome to Empire.
What's up? Thanks for having me here.
We're obviously going to talk about your in-game NFTs and Fractal and all that stuff. But actually, the first thing I wanted to ask you is just, dude, you sold this company for like almost $1 billion. You could chill on an island forever. Before talking crypto, let's talk about just why you jumped back into the founder seat. Why you put yourself through this again. I'm curious to hear where that spark came from.
Yeah, well, I started a lot of companies since starting Twitch. Most of them haven't worked out in that same capacity. But
I remember we tried selling Atrium a sponsorship one time. I was like, this is I want to get them as a sponsor for an event, but it didn't work out.
But I just like making stuff and learning about new industries and new products. And so for me, entrepreneurship is a way to express some creativity and learn about something new. And I like to do something, So I've had my fair share of very nice beach time, but at the end of the day, just like, I want to build stuff.
I won't talk about this for 2% of this conversation, but I'm actually just curious on like founder to founder. I'm just curious what happened like when you sold Twitch and then you're like, you see that wire come through and you're like, all right, did you hit the beach or obviously there's like offboarding time, but what happened?
Like when we sold it, I didn't have to go with the company. So I was a non-continuing employee, which, so I was like basically hanging out for a while. And then I actually joined Y Combinator and I was investing full time at YC as a partner. And, but outside of that, like, what did you do? Like, what did I do in terms of like, did I kind of like go apeshit and spend a lot of money? I guess I kind of, maybe it's all relative. Like I bought a car, I bought a G-Wagon. That was like my first car that I ever purchased, actually. So that's kind of like an expensive car, I guess. And then I bought a house, which is probably an expensive house for almost everyone in the country. But in San Francisco, it was like 3 condos, And I moved into one condo that was like, whatever, 1,200 square feet. And then I moved my brothers into beneath me. So that was my extravagant expenditure. And I had like a little bit of I used it as like a home office where like people would come over and like hack on projects. So nice. I don't know. It wasn't that ridiculous, Nice. I didn't buy a private jet or anything.
Just a bunch of punks and apes.
Yeah.
At what point did you kind of discover crypto and when did it pique your interest? And how has your journey been over the years?
Yeah. So the first time I think I'd heard about it on Hacker News, right? Like about Bitcoin on Hacker News since, probably 2009 or 10, right? And then in 2013, I remember I tried to invest in Coinbase, but the seed round was full. And so I ended up buying Bitcoin on Coinbase instead. And it immediately crashed. This was like when it was this kind of first hype around it where it like got to 800 per Bitcoin. And I was like, oh my God, I should invest in this because I've been like kind of following it for a little bit. So I bought a bunch of Bitcoin and then it crashed. And then I was like, I'm the bag holder, I'm an idiot. So I was like, I kind of just forgot about it. I just like held it and forgot about it. And then I remember in 2016 and 17, like Ethereum was was becoming a thing. And then I realized like, I don't know, I'm not like tracking this crypto space enough to like really understand what is going to work. Like even though we had invested in a couple crypto companies and protocols and Y Combinator, like, invested in Filecoin, like in Protocol Labs, like we didn't, like I wasn't really paying attention to what was happening in that same way that I was with like the rest of tech. And so I invested in a couple funds, like crypto funds, like Polychain being one of them, and then promptly like also forgot about it for years. And then I was also interested. I kind of like became an advisor to a few projects that wanted my help more on the like consumer side, like Audius and Theta was one, and then but at the same time, I was like deeply skeptical because I was thinking to myself, like, I don't know if you could build a consumer application in the same way that we built Twitch. Like, could you build a consumer application that had like a high throughput of transactions that were in a decentralized way? And I was kind of like, I don't think so. And so like while I was still kind of tracking it, I wasn't like really red pilled, and I was like I was an investor, but I wasn't like really like I wasn't like really a true believer. And then what happened was about a year ago, or maybe like a little over a year ago, I finally kind of took another look, and I remember looking at Audius, and they have this fully decentralized app, and I was like, oh, it like works, They created an app where you don't have to really know anything about crypto to use it. And that was really interesting to me as like someone who builds consumer apps. And then I, at the same time, I have a couple friends who started this protocol called Brain Trust, which is like a freelancer marketplace. And for the longest time, I was asking them like, why does it need to be crypto? Like this could be like there's a centralized application like Upwork and it works fine, right? They kind of explained that this was a way to incentivize a large population in this market to like ape into something and like get involved, and that kind of like made the light bulb go off for me. And so those two things made me really interested in building in the space, and that I would say that's when I was like kind of fully red pilled, was only like a year ago, even though I've been holding crypto for a long time.
Yeah, Justin, candidly, like I don't blame you. I think like over the years, it has been until very recently where we didn't really have a lot of consumer-facing applications that had real traction. I think Axie Infinity really was an eye-opening experience for a lot of people, proving out at least the gaming vertical play to earn. Obviously, like you built Twitch, had millions of users. It had a great outcome. Now, I've heard you talk about and say, gaming and NFTs are way bigger or can be way bigger. And I think for a long time, I was also investing kind of in the Valley. Every single fund back in the day, I started in 2012 and like 2014, 2015, it was like, it was crickets. No one wanted to touch this stuff. I'm talking about the Sequoias of the world, Kleiners of the world. Like everyone was so skeptical of crypto. And I think much like your journey, it's been really like this last year where people have now, really embraced this. And to what do you attribute that to? Is it really NFTs? Is it really gaming? Is it COVID? Like, and where do you see kind of this space going over the next 6, 12 months, 3 to 5 years? Like, what's kind of your thesis on that?
I kind of think it had to unfold like this, right? Like it's both technological improvements in the space, but it's also like crypto is a movement, or like it's like a philosophy or psychology, or like a group, like people accepting it, right? Like there's this whole NFT movement has been really people accepting that something has value online, like there's a certain type of value, and they like it's if enough, what is value? Like in economic value, it's like two people or like a market of people believe that something is worth something, right? Like you can say the same thing about Pokemon cards or Magic cards or something like that. Like before the release of Magic cards, like the idea that these would have like enduring value would be like people would be very skeptical, right? If you told them that, and then like obviously once there were enough people who were interested in it and motivated to hold these assets, then they became something of value. And now you have like, people are opening packs of trading cards that are, like hundreds of $1,000s or whatever. And so, I think crypto is the same way, where you've had like more and more people embrace that there's, value here in these assets, and that has created a market. And at the same time, you had a technological improvement over time and example applications that have made it possible for like people like me to be inspired of like, oh, there could be something there, right? So like the DeFi thing, I wasn't really interested in DeFi very much, but there are all these applications, right, that kind of work even because the stakes are so high, like the amount of money moving around is so high that like paying a transaction fee that's whatever, $100 in Ethereum gas or whatever, and waiting 30 minutes like is not the end of the world, right? And so, there were these, I think in the last couple of years, this suite of DeFi applications coming out has been in a way, it's like been inspiration for all these now, like maybe more mainstream or consumer applications, including NFTs.
Yeah. I think like if I remember, like Twitch really was one of those things that a lot of people were skeptical as well. Like, why would other people want to see other people like stream and play? And lo and behold, obviously it became a huge market, and you kind of created a category in many ways. And I think NFTs are doing that for people, especially for artists that are realizing, hey, we can circumvent all these galleries and just be discovered. And this is a notion of digital property rights, and the reach that you have with the internet. And so I'm curious, like if you were to build Twitch again today and knowing what you know about crypto and where things are, what would you do differently?
Yeah. So I think crypto, Twitch would obviously be a decentralized project in some way today. I think it wouldn't necessarily be like the infrastructure. Like, I don't necessarily think that like you need to make the streaming part of it decentralized or the infrastructure, although you could. But I think it's more importantly, you would create some sort of decentralization around the ownership and economy that powers Twitch, right? Twitch has this concept of bits, and people are like buying things, buying basically a virtual currency and donating it to the users. And it's a closed system, right? But like what's interesting about crypto is like, I think when you make this an open system, you can create there's like all these different kinds of apps, and economy can emerge on top of it that you never really expected. And it can be a much more robust economy. And the way that crypto projects do it is they kind of invert the ownership model, right? So like instead of like owning equity in some company or whatever, and then being incentivized to be a gatekeeper and like taxing this toll road that you create, like you're like owning some treasury in this token. You distribute the rest of it to like the people who make the project happen, like the people who make the marketplace. Like in the case of Twitch, it might be the streamers or early viewers, and then you benefit if like this becomes like a thriving economy. And so I think that in the early days of Twitch, there were all these different like apps that were built on top of Twitch, including like tipping apps and donation apps and stuff like that are all like gone because like they replaced it with a first party thing, And so I think like making something a decentralized project kind of mirrors more the days of the early web where, it's much more of an open ecosystem, and you're incentivized to build an open ecosystem. And to me, that's what's really interesting and compelling about it. And then that you can be justly rewarded for that today.
Mm-hmm. Would you think that the economics for creators, live streamers would be different?
I think, the equilibrium point, the answer is probably no, because like what's effectively happening is you're paying for attention, and like you're monetizing that attention. And it's really up to like, what do the people want to give you? Like what do the end viewers want to donate, right? What are they willing to? Although like maybe there's some sort of inversion like with NFTs and kind of artists, where it turns out there's a lot more people willing to give when it's like a certain type of thing that they're getting in return for it, right? But like, let's say, like, I don't know what that would be. So like, if it's the same model as Twitch right now, I think the equilibrium point would be no. But in the early days, you could have imagined an incentive model where the early people would have gotten some sort of like token that would have grown in the case that this is a successful community, right? Which they didn't get. There were other benefits to being early to Twitch, and that, maybe you were able to aggregate an audience early, and it was easier earlier, but they didn't really have that enduring like equity value in the project.
Yeah. Although to be fair, I mean, I think Twitch was farther along the spectrum of a more equitable.
Just to be clear, Twitch has like lost money over time, right? So like Twitch itself is effectively, they have the streamers have been the primary beneficiaries of Twitch on a like cash flow basis, right? But like obviously the equity value of Twitch was like held by at first the founders and the investors, and then Amazon.
Absolutely. That's what I was alluding to. I think as it relates to like a lot of the criticism of Web2 apps is that a lot of this value, like YouTube, for instance, a lot of these influencers, like there's huge marketing spend going to these platforms, but the share that these creators get is de minimis, relatively speaking, to what you can get in Web3. Now, Twitch, I think, was farther along that spectrum, where you actually, as you alluded to, share, like you were closer to what a Web3 app today looks like than what a Web2 kind of like traditional kind of company like Facebook or Twitter or YouTube.
That's right. But I mean, there's still like the idea behind this Twitch equity being worth a lot. And obviously it's a private company inside of Amazon, so you don't really know what it's worth. Like the idea behind that though, is that like it will be worth something in the future because you can exercise your monopoly power, right on like this Twitch community. Yeah.
When I think about what the big Web 2, like what is Web 2, right? Web 2 in my mind in one sentence is just creating companies that created a marketplace or aggregated a marketplace and then grew it to be really, really large, created a moat with user growth, network effects, and then basically made money by rent seeking, right? And so I think when we think about like there's all these marketplace businesses, whether it's like Uber or Lyft or Airbnb or eBay or whatever it may be, it's all these marketplace businesses. And I think the dream of Web3 is like, all right, Web3 is really just about changing incentive mechanisms. And we're like, all right, we're going to change these incentive mechanisms. It's going to be a fairer world. We're talking about Twitch and these streamers make more money maybe. But when I look at Web3 businesses, it's like, what are all the big businesses? It's marketplaces again. It's like Coinbase and Binance and FTX and now OpenSea, and even with you guys, you're creating a marketplace, right? So like how much of the Web3 businesses do you think how much are things going to change really?
Yeah, well, I think that the end goal is something that's like looks better for the consumers, right? Like I feel like there are decentralized players in these marketplaces, and like those we'll kind of see what happens in terms of like, do the marketplaces end up ultimately being decentralized or not? But I think that like the difference is that there's like just a greater ability to participate from like the from the user base. Like they're able to participate, maybe not like right now in the marketplace companies themselves, but like in the growth of the assets, which is like incentivizing people to come in. But I mean, I don't know. I guess that's a good question, like on whether like will it just be like centralized companies like Coinbase and OpenSea that are like the kind of like the owners of Web3 again. I think that's like a legitimate concern actually.
When I think about Twitch's business model, Twitch solved two problems for streamers. Like Twitch was all about the streamer, and Twitch solved two problems in my mind. One is it gave them more streamers, and like it gave them an audience, which is great. And then, but an audience isn't good unless you can pay the bill. So it gave streamers an audience and it gave them money, right?
That's right.
When you think about Fractal, what is that problem? First off, who is the streamer in your mind? Who are we solving the problem for? And then what is that problem?
Yeah, I think our goal is, we're solving the game company's problem, right? Like we think of the game company as our streamer. We love game companies. The game companies are the people who are creating the content. And so we think of like the game developer. And when we started the company, we just went and interviewed every game developer we knew or was building like a blockchain game. And we said, how can we make things better for you? And it was very similar to how we started Twitch, which was going to all the streamers and asking them what they needed, which it turned out, as you identified, was like the audience and money. And so, the game developers want something similar. They want to reach an audience. They want to inform and educate an audience about like what their game is about and how, the crypto economics behind their game work, how their economy works. So they want to access those players, and then they want to be able to sell them, into their game and get them engaged in their game. So when we think about Fractal and what we're doing, it's like really helping them do those things.
Santiago is much deeper into games than I am, but like when I see just like the rhetoric on Twitter and things like that, and like just what media says about these gaming companies, especially like the TradFi gaming companies, it is anti-NFT, right? From an employee level to a C-suite level to the users. But it sounds like your conversations are slightly different, perhaps. So what are those conversations looking like?
We're talking to people who are on the spectrum, like the whole spectrum, from already building a crypto game to maybe more of like a traditional company, like gaming company that's interested in crypto. And like we're talking to this whole spectrum of people, and what people. With the conversation, like obviously on one end, they're like red pilled already and they want to like build a crypto game and they see it as better for themselves and for the users, And I think that's true. Like the reason why I think this will win as a business model for gaming, I think crypto will be the predominant business model of gaming for many games anyways, many types of games. And the reason is because it's actually better for both the players and the game company at the end of the day. It's better for the players because it's an opportunity for the players to actually participate in the economic upside of the game and also retain the value of their assets, the things that they earn in the game or pay, buy in the game. Tens of billions of dollars are spent every year on in-game items. But like if you stop playing the game, there's nothing. That's it. That's the end. Or if the game like deprecates or shuts down or whatever, you don't have any like real ownership over these things. And I don't think necessarily that means people are going to want to play games to make money primarily. I think it's just that like there's going to be an economic component of like, okay, you spend a lot of time in this game and you retain some value. Maybe when you're done with it, you're like, just like you could trade in a game at GameStop like 20 years ago that you bought like on, DVD or disc or whatever, you'll be able to like actually monetize your thing like when you exit this game now, or if you need liquidity or whatever, or not, right? Like most people probably won't even care. So it's better for the players, I think, and then it's better for the game companies themselves. I actually think at first it's kind of like a worse, like people are like, oh, it's a money grab or whatever. I think it's at first it could be like a lot of game companies will see it as a worse business model, because they're putting this IP online. It's like on the blockchain, like anyone could just build an experience on top of their and interacting with their NFTs, and so there's like this loss of control that like I think will be, uncomfortable for big companies. But what they'll realize is like when you build something that's an open ecosystem, that's when it can really take off and have like lasting durability beyond any one person, right? And Ethereum is like the perfect example. It's obviously not a game, but like it's this huge ecosystem, and if you had been like if you're a Vitalik or something like that holding a huge amount of Ethereum, then like you are a huge beneficiary of that ecosystem, right? And I think like these game companies with their sets of NFTs and their maybe token economy, if they build one, will be these beneficiaries of the open ecosystems and open economies that they create. The smartest game companies in gaming NFTs are thinking of like their NFTs and their economy as IP, and they're like, we want other people to make stuff on top of our IP. It's a complete inversion of the traditional media company model, and that's really cool because I think that's both smart and it's going to create a lot of economic value for them, but it's also like awesome because it creates all this remixability and, programmability on top of their systems, which is like what the internet's all about.
Yeah. I think on that point, there's a lot to unpack on gaming, which I love. And I think one question for you is, we talk a lot about like interoperability and composability in DeFi context, and in gaming, like I think the only studio that I can think of that kind of has done this to some extent is Nintendo, where you have some like Super Smash Brothers, and it combined a lot of games. You had Donkey Kong and Mario and Wario, and like you could play this game. But otherwise, and so it was like, but it was very much centralized and cohesive, like a game, and people liked it. But like, do you think it's, back to the point of like, you always want to build stuff that consumers want. And I am curious if you think that this is something that is going to be actually appreciated, but like, okay, you're playing Axie, and then you can go ahead and play like another game in crypto.
Yeah. I don't think they're going to connect in the same way of like, you can use this one sword in this other in every land you go to or something like that, like every metaverse you go to. I don't think it necessarily will look like that. I think, there's a lot of skepticism about like composability or reusability in that way. I think it's much more likely that, okay, so like I create a set of NFTs for my game. My game is successful, right? Like it's, it's very successful. And then other developers are like, hey, I'm going to like, if you own an NFT of Justin's game, we're going to make it do something in our game, because effectively that's like marketing to my users, right? Like it's an incentive to make my users like join their game. And at first I might be like, oh my God, like I don't want that. Like I want my users to retain in my game. But what I will realize is like, oh, I'm selling all these NFTs from, my game, and then they're being used in all these other people's games, which make them more valuable, like intrinsically more valuable. And so I think it will look more like, that's one way that it might happen. Another way is like, and we're doing that with this like, Fractal NFT. We created this NFT of, that for Fractal, it's 100,000 snowflakes that have unique attributes. And there are various people who are building games around or incorporating these NFTs in their game as a way to say, I want to get that Fractal community excited about my game, right? So it's a win-win, and because it's enabled by this open ecosystem, the fact that they're all on the blockchain. We can't even control if someone creates an experience around it, anyways. So, that's one way. Another thing is like people are creating APIs, for their NFTs or, their digital assets to be used in other people's experiences. So, there's a company called Web that's like a 2D pixelverse, like kind of metaverse that, they're importing other avatars, like other PFP collections, and like turning them into sprites so that if you're a holder, you can use their, bring your Bored Ape or whatever into their pixelverse. And so like, obviously there's going to have to be work done, but the incentive to do that work, to bridge these metaverses exists because it basically creates value for both parties, right?
Empire is brought to you by Paraswap, which just reached a whole new level in the DeFi game. Paraswap started as a DEX aggregator, which, for those who don't know, it's like a Google Flights or an Expedia for swapping crypto. You would obviously never just go directly to an airline's website. Same thing with crypto. You would never go directly to an exchange to trade or to swap. You'd go to Paraswap. Why? Because they aggregate liquidity from more than 60 different sources to get you the best prices and the most efficient gas transactions. Now, Paraswap, obviously still the best aggregator out there, but now there's more. They now have staking, they have yield farming. There's this one feature that I love. It shows you exactly how much money Paraswap saved you on your last trade. They're now on 5 different blockchains. They've got Ethereum, Binance, Polygon. They recently added Avalanche and Phantom. So it's really simple. If you're an Empire listener, if you are new to DeFi or you're a power user of DeFi, really anybody, if you're dabbling in DeFi markets, you have got to try Paraswap. Their new staking and yield farming products are a game changer. They've taken DeFi to the next level with really one of the first mature DeFi products that I've ever seen. So head on over to paraswap.io. That is paraswap.io, and start swapping, trading, staking, and so much more today.
We've seen folks like Mark Pincus, kind of allude and embrace this Web3 movement. He has a punk as his, profile picture and what have you. And I've heard that he's interested in this space. Curious, do you think that the traditional gaming companies, Activision, all this stuff, can actually make a transition and have a strategy in Web3? Or do you think that it's very difficult for someone like them to kind of pivot and adjust their business model to this new paradigm? And it's going to require more like just from scratch building something new.
Yeah, I think it's exactly like free to play, 14 years ago. So, free to play came out and people were like, this is a scam. These games suck.
It's like Mafia Wars and Farmville.
Yeah.
And everyone's like, what's going on?
People were like,
here?
this is a scam. These games suck. They're not real games. Real gamers will never play this kind of game. We want to pay up front. We don't want to be nickel and dime for every transaction. And now fast forward, 14 years, you have Free Fire or, Fortnite or, all these games that are primarily free to play games. And then there's monetization in the game and they sell you digital assets inside the game, right? And players accept that, right? And what happened was, and same with mobile, actually. It's like, at first the entrance, because there's an innovator's dilemma, right? You have an existing business model, you don't want to disrupt that. So you see game companies who, traditional game companies like Ubisoft or something like that, they dip their toe in and then they get, the community gets enraged and they're like, oh, never mind. But, what happens is like the new entrants will be the first, like new startups will have no innovator's dilemma. They have nothing to lose. So they'll be the first ones to be very successful, like an Axie or something like that. And then what you'll have is like the traditional game companies will come in and they'll say like, hey, we have a lot of IP. We know how to build games. And so they'll figure it out, and that's happened on mobile or with free to play, right? Like you have something like FIFA or whatever that's like hugely dominant. And obviously they were kind of like EA is wasn't like super early to the party, right? Or they'll buy, like Activision, Blizzard buying King, so they'll eventually, I think a huge amount of big company, traditional gaming companies will have, big properties in the blockchain game space because this will just be the new business model of every game.
You had this tweet like maybe 3 weeks ago about Fortnite versus Open Fortnite.
Yeah.
If you remember that.
Yeah.
And so I just kind of want to dig into like, why would a game studio switch over? Because if I'm looking at Fortnite's business right now, I'm like, you're doing $5 billion a year in revenue. You're doing pretty damn well, right?
Yeah. So I don't think that you're probably not going to switch over Fortnite, right? Itself. Like you have this huge innovators done for switching Fortnite, but you might have a small, you might have a studio that you spin up that's just focused on blockchain games, and you might give them some IP that's like a, valuable IP to like see what they can do with it. Right. And you're going to do that because the upside is huge, right? Like it could be like, look at Axie Infinity. It's worth a couple $2 billion. That's what they've raised at in private market valuations. And like they're, so you could still have something of value. It's just a different business model, right? The model is like you're minting NFTs and holding, NFTs and tokens instead of just you're, selling, digital skins. Like it's not that different actually, but it, maybe there's more of like a treasury model, but you still have this opportunity to make a huge amount of money if you create this robust open ecosystem.
Basically, it's actually very similar. It's actually a surprisingly similar model, right? And like right now, you've got Fortnite, you're creating these skins. You're making $5 billion a year in like Web3 or like open Fortnite, whatever you want to call it, just hypothetical. You're still creating skins. They're just called NFTs, but now you can have developers and gamers build things on top of those. And I think that's where it probably gets interesting. And then maybe Epic takes like a royalty on each of those NFTs or something of that. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, like, here's a basic example. Like with Fractal, NFT, we like in the first couple of weeks of Fractal NFT, I think the first month, we sold like, we gave this NFT collection away, right? We gave it away and we put a 7% royalty on it. And there was like $4 million of secondary transactions, right? And so like for something that was free, it cost us probably about the amount that we took in royalties in that first month. But like, basically there's a business model there where like actually we're generating revenue from like, this NFT asset, right? And so I think it's not hard to imagine. And we're like nothing, right? It's just like a 2-month-old startup with no like IP and no brand or anything yet. So you can imagine for like big companies that this can be an enduring model that is actually very valuable to them. And if they build something where people are looking to exchange and trade those NFTs and do different things with the NFTs, and that could be something that's, really a valuable, durable revenue stream for them. Like, look at all these NFT collection companies that aren't in gaming, right? Like a Bored Ape or whatever. Like they're raising, I think the news broke that they're thinking of raising money in the multi-billion dollars valuation from Andreessen. Yeah. And they've generated like, tens of millions of dollars in fees, if not like more than that. Now I don't know. I don't follow it. Or like something like Azuki, where they like became the #1 collection in January, and they're like, they generate like $50 million in fees. Like, these are real media companies with real IP, with real durability in the, in the like, it's not just that initial primary sale. It's like, if you create an incentive and reason why people want to hold this and they're transacting around it, then you can that can be a recurring revenue stream for you.
I mean, if you don't think Bored Apes are a real business, you probably also don't think Supreme is a real business, right?
Exactly. Yeah. It's obviously it's a certain type of business, and a lot of people like might not be, there's a lot of class of investors who might not rate like this kind of like media or culture business, but like it's definitely a thing,
How a lot of what we hear from skepticism of people looking is like, it's pretty impressive. Some like Bored Ape in 6 months, what they've done, made crypto relatable to so many people. A lot of new users haven't touched crypto and it's their first experience, and crypto for the first time is like relatable to people. And there's a reason to come into the space because people love collecting. It has felt like there's an influx of supply of all these different projects. And a lot of it is speculative activity. I'm curious, like, how you think about the durability of some of these projects. You talk about IP. I think it's a fascinating concept of how to think about IP in a Web3 context in an open source kind of world. But I'm curious, like, what are your views, especially tying it to kind of Fractal? Like, how do you think about building a durable business and how to kind of play in this attention game? Ultimately, it's super competitive, right? You're not only competing within Web3, but also Web2, and well capitalized, probably more fluid from an execution perspective, companies that are a bit more centralized that can build kind of very beautiful games. And people have to, at the end of the day, like, from an attention perspective, would you want to play Call of Duty or Axie?
Yeah. So I mean, it's the same thing as all types of media, right? Like, whether it's NFTs on OpenSea or NFT games or music or YouTube videos, there's like infinite people who want to make media, right? Like, human beings are creative, like that people would love to have a creative pursuit as their job. So there's a long line of people who want to make media, and you're competing with this like huge, tail of people who are vying for the user's attention, right? And I don't think crypto games are any better or any worse. I think in terms of the quality of the games today, there's like, I think a lot of the games, in the V1 were a little more like DeFi wrapped with like some graphics or something like that. Whereas what you're starting to see now, what I'm seeing is like, there's so many different AAA developers who are now getting in the space who are more gaming first, and then they're adding some sort of open economy on top of their game. And I think that's going to bolster the fun of the games, but yeah, there's going to be, we're going to see that transition happen over time.
One thing that starting to happen is the financialization of NFTs, right? And
yeah.
This feels like it'll be pretty interesting, and I feel like pretty great for the industry in general. Is in just the ability, like if I want to buy a home and I have a bunch of Bitcoin, I used to have to sell that Bitcoin, but now I don't have to sell the Bitcoin because I can just take a loan out against the Bitcoin, which was really good for the market in general. I mean, not that I'm saying that's a good financial decision, but I can do it.
It's a terrible financial decision, but yes, you can do it.
I can do it. So actually, all right. So now I'm going to change my question. Financialization of NFTs. It's probably pretty good to create a financial market around these things, a more liquid financial art market in general, just because the art market is so inefficiently financial. There are obviously downsides too, right? So what do you think about just like the financialization of NFTs, pros, cons? Where does this space head?
Well, I think generally the financialization of NFTs is good. The financialization of of most things in the world is like something people want, right? And it is good because it provides them liquidity and optionality and like things that they can do with their thing. So I like to think of it like the car, right? Like 100 years ago, the Ford created Model T, and then like you had to go and take cash and buy this car, right? And then fast forward 100 years, we've built this whole financial industry around the car. Industry has popped up around the car, right? Like you can get a loan to get your car. You can use your car as a way to get liquidity or a loan if you need a short-term.
That's the whole market. Getting
cash.
a loan to get your car is like the whole car market now.
Yeah, and then you can get a loan to like if you have you own your car, you need a loan. You need short-term cash, right? You can buy your car and turn it into a yielding asset by like putting it on GetAround. There's companies that buy like fleets of cars and put them at airports, and that's like it's a whole business model. And so I think the same thing's going to happen with digital assets too, right? Like the same as it happened to physical assets. So with digital assets, you can with an NFT, you could imagine getting loans to buy NFTs. You could imagine like getting liquidity on your NFT by borrowing against it, securing a loan with it against the NFT, et cetera, right? Like there's like all these different things you can do. You can lend it to someone. And it's all, I think it's going to be much faster because they're all online already. So it's like you can put in a smart contract and make it like actually enforced through a programmable means, which is like way easier if you think about it than like what has to be done, like all the infrastructure to like lend you a car, right? Or something like that, or give you a loan against a car. So I think it's good that, obviously the bad part is that like people are probably going to borrow against their highly speculative assets that are probably in like due for a bear.
I was going to go say you're taking a loan out against your magic sword that you got on your quest and like, ooh.
So like that's probably not that great of an idea, especially at this moment. And then like the loan to value ratio that you get is probably going to be way higher than you deserve to, given the the proven durability of these assets so far. Like we don't know. And so, I think there's a lot of like potential downside on a, per user basis, but I think it's probably good in general. And like, it's very interesting to me in general.
I want to go back to your experience at Twitch and like, did you expect, I think as a category that has blown up in a way that like a lot of people didn't even expect it, like esports and the idea of esports, even like perhaps being in the Olympics, and like it's become such a like big industry. But I remember, back in 2014 and, not too long ago, people were very skeptical of this being actually a thing. And it has changed like the way, it's created so many different employment opportunities, and it has some interesting parallels to where we are, I think, from a consumer application standpoint for crypto and specifically the metaverse. But I want to understand, like, personally for you, like, was it a surprise? Like, were you always like very bullish on like streaming or part of it was just like, were you blown away by the level of traction that you got?
Yeah, well, of course. I'd be like lying to you if I was like, yeah, we knew it all along. I think we thought in the best case scenario, Twitch could be a site that was kind of like the biggest video game site out there, the biggest video game video site, which was like, at the time, it was like gametrailers.com back in 2010 when we started working on Twitch. And so like, obviously it's way bigger than that now. It's like it's top 20 site in the US, maybe like number 11 or something like that. I don't know. It's pretty big, right? Like, and obviously it's this internet phenomenon. It's far surpassed what I ever thought it would be. The funny thing about like now sitting here with like gaming NFTs, I'm like, well, I've seen this movie before. Like lots of people are like, this shit is a scam. It's not going to work. Why would anyone want to do this? Like, but there's this hardcore, passionate base of core users, and you can extrapolate that behavior to like a much larger segment. And I'm like, this is gonna, like, now it's like when people are like, I post a tweet storm about gaming NFTs or something, people like hate on it. I'm like, oh, it's okay. I get it. Like, it's the same thing as like when we walked into like, VC's offices in 2012 and tried to pitch them Twitch, and they just were like, this is stupid. I don't get it. Like,
Yeah. Where do you see kind of this movie play out for gaming and NFTs? I think a lot of times we envision, I think Chris Dixon talks about like skeuomorphic concepts, and like we think a lot about like things that exist in Web 2, and now we translate that and map it into a Web 3 context, and not so much attention is placed on entirely new use cases, applications that are possible because of certain unique properties of this technology. I'm curious, like, as you think about investing in the space, building in the space, what are some of the things that perhaps some people are too myopic and are not thinking about, but you think you are, from a use case perspective, or just applications that get you excited, that you think are like probably not talked about as much?
well, the funny thing is I probably don't know what they are, right? Like if I knew, like, I don't think I'm like, I'm a creative entrepreneur, and I think I think of lots of great ideas, but I don't think of all of them, right? And I think like there's going to be, Fractal's kind of an obvious one of like, okay, let's create a marketplace that's focused on this specific vertical. And then, like we talked about lending, I think there will be like lending marketplaces or lending, tools to help people borrow and lend NFTs. And, there'll be all this financialization, like, around NFTs. And there's probably going to be other ways that people, like there's going to be all these like tooling around NFTs, and like, you're already starting to see it pop up with like ranking sites and rarity sites and all this stuff like that. But I think, like, to me, the most interesting, maybe not the most interesting, but the most obvious, and I think the most enduring value things in this industry are going to be the games, right? Like it's going to be the next Fortnite. It's going to be the next, you don't need to change the business model. Like you don't need to invent something new. It's just going to be the game with this and with an NFT layer that's like, people already want to play games and they spend a huge amount of time in them, right? So like, I think those will be the companies where if you're looking at Web3 gaming with NFTs, those are going to be the big winners, And so, I guess my bet would be like that. How this movie plays out is like not necessarily that there's something new that we haven't discovered already that really changes the industry, but rather just that the industry shifts over the next 10 years until, my prediction would be that like NFT related sales and business models around selling NFTs and collecting royalties for NFTs for gaming companies will surpass, free to play, non NFT related, digital asset sales in 10 years, because just like free to play digital asset sales surpassed, probably around a decade in, like selling the game upfront fees for buying the game, So to me, like, it's just like, this is the new business model. There's going to be a mix of new players and old players that engage in it. And it's going to be, probably make gaming even bigger.
I think the biggest kind of barometer of this space is human capital. Like, from your perspective, are you seeing, really, really good talent come into the space across gaming, or creatives, builders? Because I think for a long time, it felt like it was like tier 2 engineers coming to crypto, a lot opportunistic. I feel that like part of the impetus for like folks like Sequoia coming into the space is like a lot of their portfolio companies just have had attrition, and like some smart devs are just coming in and building. I'm curious if you find that to be true from your perspective and from where you stand.
100%. Like that's true both in gaming talent and Silicon Valley, traditional engineering talent. And like, I think there was an article in the New York Times about this like a month ago, maybe, where they were saying that traditional FANG companies, these Facebooks and Googles can't retain talent because it's just so exciting to build in crypto for engineers. It's exciting, it's fast, and you can have really amazing liquidity that's competitive with your FANG salary and bonus like pretty quickly, at least that potential. And so, I've seen tons of, even with Fractal, right? We've had people come from Google and Stripe and, like a lot of like really high quality companies. They're leaving, they have a huge opportunity cost to come work with us because it's like people are excited about it. And so it is attracting that like top tier Silicon Valley talent. And I think that's one of the most exciting, reasons why I'm interested, that's why I'm interested in it.
While you guys are talking about this, I'm looking at our Slack channel. We've got like a new Slack channel, and someone just posted that the one of the senior people at Facebook and Instagram's like developer platform just left He's been there. This guy Chris Ackerman has been there for like a decade. Just left to go to OpenSea to be their head of developer experience. So I think the talent's flooding in. I mean, I think going back to what you were saying, Justin, about just like it's tough to predict what you can't predict, right? And what we like. Yes, of course, the financialization of NFTs is going to happen. Yes, you're going to be able to take loans out against NFTs. Yes, in-game NFTs are going to happen. I think one of the coolest parts about working in crypto is, I mean, when HTML was created, right, you could predict that the New York Times would put their newspapers online. You definitely couldn't predict Uber and Snapchat, right? And so it's interesting to think about just like what NFTs, like, I feel like we can predict that there will be in-game NFTs and that there'll be marketplaces, and I think Fractal will be huge. But like, you can't predict the things like Uber and Snapchat that will come out of this stuff. And I think that's one of the coolest things. So
yeah, exactly. That's what I always say that because I'm a programmer at heart, and that's like what gets me fired up is that there's this opportunity to build all these different programmable experiences because you're basically you're putting this stuff on the open web, and that's what's exciting to me. Like how are people going to use their NFTs as different access points or points of interactivity with different applications in the future? I have no idea, but I'm excited to find out.
Justin, let's wrap it up by just talking about Fractal for a sec. So what does 2022 look like for you guys? What are you guys rolling out? What are you guys allowing folks to do that you could never maybe do in the past without Fractal? Let's just talk about that for a second. Then we can start to close this down.
Yeah. So Fractal is obviously gaming focused. We help gamers discover, buy and sell gaming assets and NFTs. And so, we're working with game companies to be their primary launch pad for their new mints. So whenever they come out with a new NFT collection, we're helping them with that, helping them drop it to their audience, helping create awareness in our community. And I think that's our kind of near-term focus, is really focusing on the game companies. What do they want? What kind of infrastructure do they want for their NFTs and their mints, and helping them deliver that and deliver a great experience to their customers. So I feel like a lot of it is behind the scenes, not that sexy. It's like helping these guys with rarity and like figuring out distribution of attributes and, stuff like that like people don't really want to hear about, but like that's what we're doing. And we really think of ourselves as like infrastructure for the gaming companies to help them onboard the 100 million gamers into crypto.
Is there a world where game developers and gaming studios, instead of raising capital and instead of raising traditional venture rounds in the future, just raise entirely through Fractal by issuing NFTs for their game pre-launch?
Well, yeah, people are doing that now. Yeah, so in a way, this model is great for game companies because it's non-dilutive capital to fund their project, right? To fund the development of their game. And so a lot of game companies, in Web3 games are developing in the open by building they're saying, hey, here's our plan, and it's almost like Kickstarter. We're saying like you're investing.
I guess Sin City did this.
Yeah, maybe investing is the wrong word. You're buying an NFT.
Yeah.
Instead of just buying a copy of the game, you're getting an NFT and you're getting assets that will like be useful in the game. And in exchange, you're helping us fund it. So these games are very community oriented in a way.
Yeah. Awesome, man. Well, I'm excited for you. I think it's going to be big. I think it's going to be really, really cool to just see you guys grow. Any call outs for the listeners? We've got a bunch of gamers who listen to the show. Anything that you want, like any action items for folks to do?
Yeah, of course. So you can find more out about Fractal at Fractal WAGME on Twitter and Discord as our primary channels. And we're building our team, always hiring. So if you're an engineer who wants to work in crypto, or product manager, or in sales and BD, community, come check us out. Fractal.is is the website.
Fractal.is. You got to shout out the Twitter handle, which is the better. Yeah, Fractal WAGME at Fractal WAGME. You guys got like 100,000 Discord folks in like 2 days, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, in like December, like we kind of grew our Discord really quickly.
I had some Christmas FOMO. I remember. I think it was around Christmas that it was happening. I was at my family's place. I was like, oh man, but this Fractal thing's is launching. Like it's Christmas time. Come on.
I figured that people we want to launch around Christmas because the community wanted it, and then I was like, well, people are like they're gonna be at home at Christmas on their computer.
No one does anything over Christmas. Christmas is a great time to launch. Yeah,
exactly.
Awesome, man. Well, Justin, this is a hell of an episode. It's really, really interesting. Appreciate you coming on, my friend. We're all rooting for you.
Thanks for coming on. It's so exciting to see someone like you, obviously do it again, and especially now in Web3. And I think a lot of people look up to you for what you've done, and your parallels of you building Twitch are so applicable here. And for a lot of the skeptics out there, you heard it from from Justin. And I think it's an inspiration for a lot of builders and people that are looking at this space from outside in. And so thank you for coming and sharing your story with us.
Awesome. Thanks, guys.